v-am promis atunci că sunteți coparticipanți la activitățile pe care le desfășurăm. În afară de activitățile de informare, astăzi v-am invitat aici ca să participați la jocul nostru de rol, adică să vă imaginați că sunteți eurodeputați. Sunteți reprezentanți în Parlamentul European și veți participa la prezentarea unui proiect legislativ care vine din partea Comisiei Europene pe probleme de protecție a mediului și la prezentarea unor amendamente care vor permite fie votarea, fie respingerea acestui proiect legislativ. Cum sunteți cu toții interesați de proiecte ale Uniunii Europene, vă invit să vă luați rolul în serios și când vă anunță colegii voștri să participați la vot. Vă aparține decizia, doar că vă rog să fiți foarte atenți la proiectul de lege și la amendamentele care se propun, încât să votați pro sau contra sau să vă abțineți, dar în cunoștință de cauză. Cred că este plăcut pentru toată lumea să fie antrenată în proiectul acesta. Cred că merită colegii voștri din echipa de juniori ambasadori să fie și ascultați și să fie și prețuiți, la fel cum și noi vă ascultăm și vă prețuim pe voi și vă invit, mare atenție, nu durează foarte mult această ședință a Parlamentului European pe care noi o simulăm, mare atenție vă rog și respectul reciproc care se cuvine pentru a desfășura normal activitatea aceasta. Suntem atenți cu toții.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In the first part of today's meeting, the law project Solidarity for a Healthy Environment will be discussed and put to the vote. Ms. Podăriță Ioana, member of the Renew Europe Group, Environmental Commission, has the floor.
We all want to live on a continent where nature, health, and human rights are respected, as the world is more unstable than ever and the climatic shifts are changing our lifestyle drastically. We can't ignore the feeling of uncertainty that's extending in all communities across Europe, and I believe that a concern for a healthy planet should be turned into a law, whose effects could be seen and felt starting this year. The project, entitled Solidarity for a Healthy Environment, combines the ecological dimension with the urban one and proves our focus on equality of chances for everyone, even for convicts. We have the obligation to support the European Ecological Pact presented by the Commission and to keep track of the fact that we don't have the same rights, but a law that targets afforestation in all member countries would reunite regions and local communities. More specifically, we propose that the prisoners from all prisons who are executing punishments for minor crimes to be able to choose planting trees every season in areas that have been irresponsibly drained and have a poor workforce. The Commission considers that the national authorities would have the responsibility to defend convicts' rights while avoiding sanctions from the European courts. Also, as the public view on prisoners is negative, their chances of reintegrating into society would rise. Deforestation seriously affects people's health, safety of the lands, biodiversity, and the authorities are not taking any measures. So, the Commission considers that a law that directly concerns the workforce and the condition in which it can be harnessed would solve the problem of fast environmental degradation. Such a law would be education and motivation, and in the same time, it would reunite authorities and civil societies for a common goal, reduction of pollution. Our project is based on evaluations of the social, economic, and environmental impact that the Commission has realized, and we are convinced that it would stimulate voluntary involvement. Because prisoners across all European countries, regardless of the conditions in which they spend their detention and the re-education programs they participate in, are marginalized after release, I consider that their social integration will be made possible by the direct involvement in planting trees. We want to protect European values such as human rights, respect, and dignity, and I believe that through this initiative, we would be given a chance to those rejected by society, and most importantly, rescue the planet. Please support this legislative initiative in the name of our active citizenship that makes us responsible of the quality of our lives. Each group has previously received the appendix attached to the draft law, which points out precisely the conditions when the convicts could contribute to the afforestation of the areas in each country and how each country will get support. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the amendments and the announced interventions are to be presenting. So, has the floor Tile Andrei from European People's Party.
Good afternoon. I speak on the behalf of the European People's Party, and from my position, I would like to present a few amendments for the draft law currently under discussion. For the inmates to be involved responsibly in the afforestation activities, I propose that during the detention period, the inmates who stand out in this activity should benefit from periodic leaves. I also suggest that this activity should have an influence on reducing their sentence and providing them with parole releases. Secondly, I propose that the outstanding inmates should be supported by integrating them in other afforestation activities after their release. Moreover, I propose that the national administrations from each country should collaborate with the corresponding forestry agencies and in conjunction annually to elaborate afforestation plans which will be distributed to each penitentiary with attainable goals. Furthermore, I propose that this activity should be promoted through mass media at a national level. I believe that, under an educational perspective, this would make the inmates feel more useful, and it would also boost the inmates' families' confidence in the project. I strongly believe that these proposals facilitate the inmates' reintegration in society, aiding them in starting new lives based on the European values. I end my intervention with the belief that the amendments which will be further presented will be considered, and the project will become a law which will contribute in preserving one of our most valuable resources, the forests. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Epure Teodora from Identity and Democracy Group.
Air pollution is a problem at local, European and hemispherical level. A significant proportion of Europe's population lives in areas, especially cities, where there are breaches of air quality standards. Another problem is the failure of our society to reintegrate former convicts. Statistics show that the most of the prisoners who end their sentence are committing new offenses after being released from detention. For that reason, I support the idea of taking care of the environment and also trying to include the former convict in society at the same time. So reforestation and social educational programs can help prisoners to reintegrate in society and become eligible to the labor market. I think that it would be more efficient to educate citizens by direct meetings with the mayors, where they could learn about the reforestation programs in their cities. One idea would be that each of citizens, based on the area where they live, should plant 10 trees annually and replant them in the year they cut them down. Encouraging people and students alike to take part in actions of reforestation, costs would be lower. Sanctions for the local authorities in member states which do not observe the prescribed tree cutting planting ratio. Thank you.
Thank you. Kitan Rafael from Identity and Democracy Group.
Good afternoon. I support this idea and propose the establishment of programs for the rehabilitation of former inmates and reintegration into society after they have been liberated and they have participated in the proposed reforestation project. Inmates may also choose to attend greening activities such as recklessly scattered waste collection. Through these measures, we will promote the protection of the environment and will uphold and protect the rights of the detainees both during and after they have served their sentence. At the same time, we will make sure that the former detainees will be educated and informed about the environment and the interaction of the people with it, thus helping their civic formation, facilitating their rehabilitation. All things taken into consideration, the Identity and Democracy Group will support this law project and will ensure its good development. Thank you.
Thank you. Velikan Alexandru from European Conservatives and Reformists Group.
Good afternoon, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start by saying that this law, proposed by my colleague Ioana Podăriță, seems to be the one that actually saved the European Union forest. But the situation doesn't quite stay like that because of a number of reasons that apparently have not been taken into consideration properly. First of all, due to the fact that even if they are innocent, they still are prisoners, there will be needed special system of protection in their working fields. So, we are talking about professional anti-escaping equipment and cups. These things cost money. I would dare to say that if we put the number on papers, this precaution would cost more than to actually pay workers out of prison to do the same job. Secondly, because of different relief zones that varies in the European Union, some of the prisoners can say that the type of work they are doing is simply against the human rights, and that is something we cannot allow to happen in any of the countries of the European Union. They might also invoke that they are not rewarded properly by only having their sentence shortened, and might actually claim that their health is at risk. With all that being taken into consideration, I strongly disagree with this law because it jeopardizes not only the human rights, but also the beautiful, well-known image of the European Union as we all know it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Romanescu Alexandra from Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats Group.
Good afternoon, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen. We are here to analyze the project of our colleague, Mrs. Ioana Podăriță, called Social Unity for a Clearer Environment. I support this new project considering that planting trees is necessary because in Romania the number of cars multiplied while the number of trees decreased. Arbors have been cut along the roads to leave room for 1 or 2 lanes of traffic in addition, but the trees haven't been planted back. Planting trees is necessary because they are a source of oxygen, they clean the earth, absorbing dangerous chemical substances that reach the soil. They control the noise pollution, they reduce the dramatic effects of serious flooding situations. They absorb the carbon deposited in roots and strains. They keep some areas chilly, especially in the summer. They operate as a shield against wind. They prevent the erosion of the soil. They increase the value of different properties. The time spent by inmates planting trees is good for their mental state, but also for their physical state because they exercise. Furthermore, the state reduces its cost allocated for planting trees, using inmates to take care of this issue. The planted trees could be fruit trees, which may mean important incomes for the state. Taking part in planting activities could mean reduced sentences for the inmates who have never committed serious crimes. They can request less time behind the bars, just as well as the inmates who write books do. In conclusion, let's not judge, let's help, plant, and work for a better world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Garcia Miruna, representing the Greens European Free Alliance Group.
Good afternoon. The parliamentary group I represent considers that the use of detainees in afforestation is not a solution, but the correct evaluation in a 6-month term of the forestry fund in each country, and according to each, establishing the areas to be afforested and setting precise quotas for wood that can be cut from all forests, whether private or public. The resort ministers of each country must present the real situation in 6 months, as well as the measure proposed by their own government, and according to this report, we can see if it can be converted into a law at European level. We strongly believe that without a solid policy and sustained efforts by all member states, the European Union will not be able to cope with the environmental changes of the coming years. That is why we come up with an amendment to the present law that deals with the afforestation, an amendment that we consider to be an essential one and which will indicate another direction of protecting the environment, respectively of forests. This amendment is designed to convert theoretical concept into practical action, defining, without hesitation, a clear vision on how we should realize, each of us, with small but firm steps, the restoration of the forest from the European Union territory. Our amendment is based on the premise that we urgently need a green, clean, unpolluted Europe that offers the favorable environment to the growth and development of people's performance and well-being. We must work together in order for society to be aware of the fact that it needs First of all, a structural transformation from the economy based on the bio concept. Thank you.
Thank you. Tuvene Alexia from Identity and Democracy Group.
Good afternoon. Since the law proposal is based on a strong social support, I bring forward that at the end of their sentence, inmates who had an exemplary behavior should be offered financial support for accessing post-secondary education courses. Because cities are confronting with environment problems, including the impact of pollution on the health of the population, I propose that an afforestation activity should take place at the periphery and more green spaces should be created inside the city. I support the existence of a program coordinated by the Forestry Administration with the purpose of combating the illegal exploitation of forests. This way, inmates will work efficiently. I also propose that inmates should be encouraged to participate by receiving work experience. In conclusion, my proposal, to conform according to the European values, have the support of fighting against climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Negru Robert, representing European People's Party.
Good afternoon, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen. We are here today to analyze and to support the project of our colleague, Mrs. Ioana Podarița. I agree and I'm aware on the following issues. The deforestation, the pollution, the degradation of biodiversity, the destruction of animals' home, degradation of our lives, the bad situation of the air, and many other problems. Thus, I am ready to take with you all the necessary and drastic measures to stop the deforestation and the pollution. We have the moral obligation to assure to our future heirs a viable planet to live on. This motion is compatible with the Commission's objectives, helping the EU to reach climate neutrality by 2050 at the latest, and the 55% reduction target of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 in the European Green Deal. That's why we have to implement all the necessary measures in all the EU countries to increase the level of climate cohesion and all the European citizens to enjoy the advantages of great law projects. However, firstly, I found a few problems in the implementation in all the national legislation. So each country has to analyze the circumstances and comply with this law. Also, not all the states have the necessary resources on the means of reforestation. The security of population, again, prisoners who could escape in such a relief as the forest and as the mountains is a big problem, but it can be solved. We have to allocate money in order to work with law. Secondly, the obligativity shouldn't exist because it could be considered an infringement of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Nobody can be subject to forced labor, but through the plantation of trees, the prisoners could reduce them punishment. In conclusion, going over the little impediment, we should vote for this law so that all the prisoners will plant trees in areas affected, like industrial areas, mining sites, where the trees are cut down illegally, or where the Europe needs. Let's fix the environment through measures like this. We can't let the human indifference destroy our home. Let's plan together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cârnu Teodora from Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats.
Good afternoon. I support this new project because I consider that we find ourselves in a time in which the excessive and, in most of the cases, illegal and unauthorized deforestations are spreading more and more. Although the main problem is obviously represented by deforestations and how they can be stopped, we must not forget that they are followed by serious consequences regarding the environment. Therefore, although the idea of developing this project as a punishment for prisoners convicted of minor offenses would solve plenty of problems, both ecologically and socially, I propose the extension of the project. I find it only fair that those who are found guilty of illegal deforestations must also be subjected to this kind of punishment. The local authorities should solve the afforestation problem. We shouldn't need an European Union directive. Such a directive would become efficiently only if it mentioned the obligation of the national parliaments of adapting the legislation towards increasing the sanctions for illegal tree felling. The environmental standards of the European Union are some of the firmest in the world. The European Ecological Pact integrates the idea of Europe being the first neutral continent regarding the climate. Therefore, the afforestation problem should be placed in the foreground, and if the authorities of the environmental guard don't take action, this directive will be both efficient and necessary, having so many benefits, but also some conditions stated above. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Niwața Alexandra, representing the Nordic Green Left.
Good afternoon. Given the new regulations that came into force, I would like to propose a program in which the prisoners who have been cleared can receive certain facilities. The ex-prisoners should be helped in finding a job, a place to stay in case they do not have one. Also, I propose psychological and psychiatric counseling for those who have gone through trauma while serving in prison. In case they do not have the necessary studies, they should be offered to take improvement courses, training courses, or even courses at an university. I would like these people to be accepted as quickly as possible because they deserve a second chance. The society is very skeptical when it comes to an inmate who have been cleared, so I thought of a volunteer program would help a lot. Volunteering helps you discover yourself and make friends. Even the world's biggest problems at the moment, global pollution and global warming, issues related to the environment, I want to propose various volunteering activities to combat them. I thought of activities such as planting trees because in recent years too many forests have been cut, garbage collection from the ground, and various marches to support the restoration of the environment. I propose that this volunteering project should be mandatory for the ex-prisoners for a certain period of time, to be chosen according to how they behaved in prison. Former prisoners can remain in this program even after they have completed the mandatory period, if they wish. Thank you.
Thank you. Sitaru Anca, representing the non-inscripts.
Good afternoon. Today I represent the non-inscripts. We consider that the law will be successful only if, at the level of national governments, zoning strategies for afforestation would be elaborated. This should include accountability of mayors in educating citizens. Because in some countries, such as Romania, citizens abuse the property rights over forests and deforestation is uncontrolled, without any civic education of the inhabitants, the legislation cannot have effects. The group I represent considers that the norms of applying such a law would contradict the local authorities of the European countries. We also consider that only through the national legislation and decisions of each government, the environmental protection problem can be corrected and regulated. Thank you.
Thank you. Popescu Mihnea, representing the non-inscripts.
Good afternoon. I would like to tackle the problem from a human rights perspective and to point out the importance of compensation for the work done and other legal issues we need to work on as long as we want our change to be valid. First of all, in the document called European Prison Rules by Council of Europe, we can find Rule 26 regarding work by prisoners. And it stipulates that untried prisoners are entitled to work, but it also makes clear that under no circumstances can work done by an inmate to be considered a punishment. So, in my opinion, the project should focus on the educational and integrational part and not on the economic effects or worse, on the value of their work. Otherwise, we risk it being labeled as an attempt of exploiting cheap or vulnerable workforce. Another important discussion is the one regarding the compensation for the work done, because there are two ways to look at it. We can see it as a volunteering activity, or we can see it as a form of labor. And if we choose to see it as a form of labor, well, then I support financial compensation, because just being an inmate that does not justify being deprived of your work value. And if you follow the first path, then we must ensure that every inmate is treated with dignity, just like everyone else volunteering on this field. Because after all, we want it to be a rehabilitation activity and not a core. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Savoie Mihai, representing the Nordic Green Left group.
Dear colleagues of the European Parliament, good evening. On behalf of the Nordic Greens, I must pose, after analyzing all of my previous colleagues' discourses and the legislative project, a very essential question. Upon closer inspection and analysis, I find it natural to notice that the aforementioned bill has lacked to substantiate any explanation towards the criminality and the dangers posed by such a practice. In essence, at what point are criminals allowed to work, and at what point can we consider certain inmates, for example, rapists, murderers, and whatever of that degree, safe and stable behaviorally enough to work in an environment with more docile and better interacting individuals? Also, in the European Union, we can count up to 27 member states, each of them having their own autonomous penal codes. Therefore, it comes to a fundamental question in the structure of those states' penal codes to the following problem. Any inmate guilty on all charges, who no longer has the right of parole or the right of release, will not be able to benefit from such a compensatory legislature and will be transformed into cheap, free workforce for private prisons and state-owned prisons. It is essential, of course, to debate the green benefits of such a legislature, but it is even more important to look upon the practical and the empirical consequences of such a bill. If a man of proven behavior instability fit to re-engage in such social interactions, can certain inmates be trusted or not? What is the optimal level of surveillance for such people? And of course, what are the costs of such actions? Thank you.
Thank you. We thank our colleagues, and now we put to the vote the law project, Solidarity for a Healthy Environment. Therefore, we invite you to vote against or for the project. Therefore, from a total of 751 votes, we have 480 votes in favor, 241 votes against, and 30 abstentions. Thank you. The project will be sent to the European Union Council. Thank you very much.